To this point, we've talked about ecology in the backyard, that is the environment around your home, and ways that you can attract wildlife and interact more with the animals and the plants in the forest or fields that surround your home. Summer backyard ecology and fall backyard ecology really are not active seasons. That is to say, there's not an awful lot you can do during these months to attract wildlife into your local area or your local habitat. For one thing, there's a lot of food available to them, especially in late summer and early fall, when all of the trees and the shrubs and the grasses, etc., are going to seed. There's plenty of food available to them, and whatever you do really won't have much effect on their habits. There'll still be birds and mammals around the area to enjoy, but your interaction with them is relatively minimal. As opposed to the winter and the spring that we talked about previously, when you could attract a considerable amount of wildlife, especially birds, into your backyard to the bird feeders or squirrel feeders or whatever you were setting up. One thing I should mention, it is a practical idea to establish your bird feeders during the fall. Now, you won't get a lot of activity, you'll get some, but the advantage to it is that those feeders are there in place so the birds get to know where they're at. Now, they may still be relying primarily on wild food, but at least they know that the feeders are there, the feeders have feed available to them, so that when the harsh weather arrives, and it's not far off, they'll know where the food is, they'll know it's there, and you'll have your bird population already established. Don't get discouraged if you don't see birds right away. They'll eventually be there. As long as they have natural food, they won't expose themselves to any great extent to an open area where they don't have as much cover, and of course that's where your feeders will be. I'm not going to talk to you about raking your leaves off the lawn or putting mulch around your shrubs or etc. As I mentioned to you previously, this is not a home and garden show, and there are enough articles in the paper now. In fact, there were 2 last week about how to prepare your property and your plants and whatever for the winter. What I would rather do is take the opportunity to talk to you about something that does very much involve your backyard and the woods around it, something that's very appropriate to our discussion of backyard ecology. This isn't something positive, however. It's something that could be extremely negative. I think many of you are already aware of Lyme disease and the consequences of Lyme disease. It seems like only in the last few years this has been thrust upon us as a public, warning us of the dangers of Lyme disease, and that not only in southeastern New York State, but in Connecticut, in Long Island, in New Jersey, and in fact now in 36 states in the United States, Lyme disease is present, and it can affect all of us that go outside, especially any of us that live in suburban or rural areas. The problem with Lyme disease is that it's very difficult to avoid. The disease is caused by a bacteria, a type of bacteria known as a spirochete. It's a spiral type of bacteria, hence the name. The bacteria is transmitted, the spirochete is transmitted by a flea, not a flea, a tick, and the tick belongs to the genus Ixodes. The tick is prevalent throughout the United States. There's different species on the East Coast as opposed to those out west of the Mississippi that transmit the spirochete, that carry the spirochete, but the genus Ixodes is present throughout the country. The tick itself is not affected by the spirochete. It does not cause a disease. It is simply a carrier or a vector for the spirochete. Why it is such a problem is because the tick is a parasitic organism. We talked about arachnids previously. It's a parasitic organism, and the tick is carried by wild animals and birds in the habitat, the environment around us. one of the more common vectors or hosts for the tick is a white-tailed deer. Deer carry this commonly, and in fact they estimate that 70 to 80% of the deer in hot areas where this is a problem have the tick feeding on them. Other animals such as the Peromyscus, the field mouse, possums, raccoons, even cats can get infected by the tick as well. Your family dog also can carry the tick. I suspect this applies to coyotes that are moving into the area as well. How is it transmitted to humans? Well, Lyme disease caused by that spirochete can be transmitted to us from the bite of the tick. Not only from the adult tick that is parasitic, but also from the larval stages as well, the larvae stage and the nymph stage. The problem with the larvae and the nymphs, and by the way, they are largely responsible for transmitting most Lyme disease, is that they are no bigger than a grain of sand or the head of a pin. I mean, these things are tiny. And because of that, you normally would not notice the tick on your body. When the tick bites you to remove blood, some of the spirochetes can enter into your bloodstream. If they do, you have the potential for Lyme disease. Within a short amount of time after the bite, let's say that you don't notice the nymph or the larvae biting you. Within a short time after the bite, a large red rash may appear in the bite area. Now on us, it's most apt to be on the legs, as high up as the thighs. You may get it on the hands or lower arms as well. If you notice that rash, you should immediately go to your physician and tell them that it appears that you have the symptoms of Lyme disease. But in about 30% of the cases, plus or minus, no rash appears. So you have no way of knowing if you did not see the original tick bite. At that point, the next thing that occurs are flu-like symptoms. Well, since bites commonly occur, I should say most commonly occur during the summer months, and since you normally would not get flu during the summer months, if you get flu-like symptoms in July or August, then that ought to be an alert to you that it could be Lyme disease, especially since it is becoming so prevalent in many areas of the country. If you get treatment at that point, you're still all right. If you're not treated, then the disease may lay dormant for months, and it may reappear, most certainly will reappear, in other types of ailments, such as chronic rheumatoid arthritis, severe muscle cramping, soreness, nausea. It may cause vascular problems, that is with the circulation. And in the worst scenario, it can cause congestive heart failure and death. So this is a very serious disease. I want to get the point across. How serious is the infestation of these nymphs and larvae? It is quite serious because they found in some of the backyards in Westchester County that there may be up to 200 to 300 ticks in the lawn, in the grass around us, not just in the forest. So the infestation is fairly heavy. What can you do to prevent it? Is there any way to prevent it? Well, there's no easy way to prevent that tick from being on your property. There are ways to reduce the chances that you'll be infected by them. For example, tucking your pant legs in, spraying some kind of repellent around your pant legs and that are tucked into your socks, wearing shoes and socks all of the time, even in the summer. But ultimately, the best way to avoid it is to not spend as much time in your yard or in the forest around you unless you're going to look at yourself, examine yourself very closely afterwards.